Mr. Chairman, your meeting is live. Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Carew.
Here.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salazar
Excused. He left
And-
his written votes
and Chairman Kinsky.
here. Senator Salazar had to present a bill in front of a committee. We have actually 4 things on our agenda. Linda, what's the fourth? Was ETS consolidation?
Mr. Chairman, that was referred to Committee 8, Transportation.
Oh, yay.
I thought we had House Bill 145 referred to as. I have that written down. What's not a,
Well, or we missed it. You know, you'd think there'd be some kind of computer system would kick out that Linda would automatically know, but it doesn't work that way.
yeah,
So I believe civil case filing fees amendments is a referral. The reviser's bill is just the reviser's bill. We're the committee of original on that. And then HB 64 legislative stabilization reserve account obligations. This is a cap fin bill and it was worked over in Casper. Tara, you were there. I was there. Mike, were you there? Okay. So Polly's going to walk us through it because the bill was substantially revised in Casper to the point I'm not sure it does a whole lot anymore. But where is Polly? Oh, there you are. Yeah, so what I asked her to do, just to help refresh our recollection, is we have an amendment that potentially restores the bill back to the way it was when we first saw it in Casper. But it's very brief. It just says like delete this line, you know, do this, and you can't tell what it does. So I asked her to pull up what we looked in Casper because we can look at the text that was eliminated and know a little bit better. So do these have the scratch outs from the amendments that were made in Casper?
Me, Mr. Chairman, Polly Scott, LSO Budget Fiscal. And hello, committee. The Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments over their interim studied ways to allow our investments to be more profitable. And as part of that, they looked at the obligations that are on the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, the LSRA, to see if some of those obligations could be modified or eliminated so that more of the LSRA balance could be invested in a total return approach. They developed 23 LSO 262 Working Draft 4, which I think you all have a copy of, which had in it 8 provisions that a subcommittee identified for possible change. And we might remember that we took a lot of testimony from stakeholders. So of the 8 provisions that they studied, 3 of them ended up to be in House Bill 64.
And refresh our recollection, the reason for the study of the LISRA was the drag.
Mr. Chairman, correct. Just the official topic was impediments to investment performance. And so the obligations on the LISRA require the State Treasurer's Office to keep more of that in a more liquid and type of investments that would have less potential for
Okay,
return.
and I don't know if the State Treasurer's Office is going to be here, but it seemed to me in Casper, I recollect that they backed away from that contention. Is that your recollection, Tara? Senator Nethercott? No? Okay. So go ahead and walk us through the 8 and what was struck out in Casper.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I think you have in front of you the working draft and it's filled with staff comments because staff it was really just a vehicle for committee discussion and staff was looking for direction. But the first staff comment there just says the proposed changes in this bill draft are based on recommendations from the subcommittee to reduce unnecessary or obsolete obligations on the LSRA. The first one it has to do with loans to the Department of Transportation from the LSRA that are up to $200 million.
This is pages 2 to 3.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chairman. And we did take testimony from the Department of Transportation and also the State Treasurer's Office on that. And that is a provision that is in House Bill 64. And so in House Bill 64, on page 2, you'll see that the provision there under 91418, line 10 of the House Bill 64, does everybody have House Bill 64? Has been reduced to $100 million. And then further down on line 17, the source of the loan has been modified from pooled fund investments to the LSRA, which is kind of interesting. The State Treasurer's Office actually testified on that they would prefer that to be more specified to the LSRA. So that provision did resolve into House Bill 64. The next,
And so then there was one other change, I think.
those are the,
They struck state agency pool.
yes, correct. They changed the source of that loan and made it more specific to be the LSRA rather than pooled
State-
fund investments. There was some discussion of perhaps having that come from the state agency pool, and the State Treasurer's Office did not prefer
So
that.
the committee, when the committee voted out the bill draft, they agreed on that. Okay.
Okay.
And this one is the one that whiteouts never used.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Remember that? If there's a government shutdown and it goes more than 30 days or something, that they wanted to be able to pay contractors. Okay.
Now, going back to the working draft on page 4, the next provision is borrowing from the LSRA for school districts to move to the state employees group insurance program up to $60 million. This is a provision that did make it into House Bill 64. The Department of Administration information testified that this was not necessary and it could be repealed. So you'll see on.
Well, let's not leave yet.
Okay.
Because that was one that was stripped out by Representative Harshman. And I think the committee was divided on it.
Mr. Chairman, on page 3 of House Bill 64, under line 20, the sections that are repealed, the first one, 93205E, is this provision.
It repeals the interfund borrowing for the
Yes.
school foundation program.
Not the school foundation program, for the employees group insurance program and school
Okay,
districts.
so that one was struck in its entirety,
Yes, correct.
and we did agree on that one. Okay.
Then, Mr. Chairman, going back to the working draft, the next provision is the one that you just were thinking of, the provision for the LSRA to provide a balance of $100 million to the school foundation program. And that's on pages 5 and 6 of the working draft. And the staff comment there just explains that it requires a transfer from the LSRA in an amount equal to the amount needed to bring the SFP to 100 million balance. That provision is not in House Bill 64.
Okay, so I'm looking at the draft 262.
Mhm.
Page 5, the current statute limits the loan to $100 million. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, it's not a loan, it's a guarantee on this one. This is
Okay.
when there's a shortfall. And it's not providing just $100 million, but to bring the balance of the SFP to $100 million. So if the SFP were in the negative, it would be more than $100 million.
And there's no limit on it. I think 262, the draft was proposing to put some limit on it because it's currently unlimited.
Well, importantly, one thing I would add is that this provision is repealed at the point when the LSRA reserve account or the LSRA is less than $500 million.
The backstop goes away when the lizard gets too low.
But that first line.
It's, pardon me?
First line on page 6. And C.
Well, that was the draft, right? Currently, it's unlimited down to, it's an unlimited refill of the school foundation program until out of the lizard until the school foundation program hits $500 million.
Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
I don't think it is unlimited. I think as Ms. Scott has testified or provided to us, it only tips or it does not tip if LISRA gets down to $500 million. So that's one limitation. The second limitation, I think, can be found on page 5, line 19. And just that first sentence there, which is to the extent funds are available after all other appropriations or transfers from the LSRA reserve account to be made on or prior to June 30th of the applicable fiscal year have been made.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's
Well,
another limitation.
I think I did reference the $500 million limit. I did limit that. I did reference that $500 million limit. So
Okay, good.
speaking theoretically, if the LISRA has $1 billion and the school foundation program is in the hole $300 million after paying all its other obligations out of the LISRA, $400 million would go into the LISRA to get it back to a $100 million balance. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
So if SFP is in the hole 300 million, 400 million automatically comes out of the LISRA. And it will do that up until the LISRA hits $500 million. So it is constrained, but there's no potential bottom to it until you hit the $500 million. I mean, if the school foundation if the LISRA is 2 billion and the school foundation program is in the hole $500 million or $750 million, it just refills out of the LISRA after the LISRA pays its other bills up until the LISRA hits $500 million. So the idea is that depending on how negative the school foundation program went, they have no idea how much of the LISRA they've got to keep liquid. So the question was whether we put a limit on it. I asked, and the data that we looked at in Casper, and you've seen that, I think 375 million is the high water mark, right?
Mr. Chairman, good memory, good recollection. That is for the related provision for the school foundation program borrowing. And this, I always refer to this as the SSFP guarantee. So the 375 million that you're recalling is the highest that there's been interfund borrowing. Okay. So that has to be repaid.
Did we ever have any suggested maximum on this automatic appropriation, which is the XXX, the top of page 6? Do you remember, Tara, Senator Nethercott or Senator Guru? Okay, and this provision 219 was struck out entirely.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And the amendment would restore it.
Mr. Chairman, I received a copy of the amendment. And yes, but I want to make sure you're referring to S-2201.
Proposed amendment S-2201. Does everybody have that? Okay, and so where does it restore 219 into the bill, Pauline?
Mr. Chairman, on the amendment, line 23 amends page 3, line 20 of House Bill 64. And so that's the repealer section, and it inserts the 94219B into that repealed section.
Okay. So that's the first thing to consider. Keep going, Polly.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, moving on to pages 6 and 7 of the working draft. The next provision that the select committee considered was the SFP borrowing provision, which is just what you were recalling. We had some staff research that showed in the last 10 years, the highest that borrowing had been was 375 million. And currently, as you can see in 21-13-316 there in the bill draft, you know, there's not a limit on it. So the committee considered that, but that provision is not in.
And 316 was struck out entirely from the bill draft, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
The next provision on pages, well, really just on page 7
of the bill draft.
and 8 of the working draft is the interfund loan to the unemployment compensation fund. And that provision is in House Bill 64. The Department of Workforce Services testified that that was not needed. And so on page 3 of House Bill 64, line 20, you'll see that 27.3.303E is repealed.
Okay. So that stayed in the bill.
What was that on page 3?
On line 20, 27.3.303E is one of the sections that's repealed, and that's the unemployment compensation fund.
On the
With-
bill.
Yeah. There's a $20 million provision for a $20 million loan from the LSRA to the unemployment compensation fund. And the Department of Workforce Services testified that they felt that should be repealed.
Okay, and that's in the bill.
That's in the bill. The next provision at the bottom of page 8 and top of page 9 of your working draft is a provision for the Department of Health to borrow for the skilled nursing facility. At the time that the select committee was considering this, the reported loan balance was 3 million, whereas the provision was for 9 million. And the Department of Health came in and testified that they'd actually used nearly all, if not all, of that 9 million. And
So that's moot.
yes, that's not in the bill, and that would not be something that could be modified at this point.
You said it did use
Yes,
$3 million?
they, at that point in time, they had only the reports that we had just had $3 million, but they had gone forward and taken another loan. And so they've used, I believe, all or perhaps just most of that $9 million provision.
I think what is it that our system does not reflect? It doesn't reflect invoices we haven't received or progress payments.
It's simply just the timing of the state treasurer's report that reports on all of these. We hadn't gotten that report yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So that provision has been used and that was discussed at the committee meeting in
Okay.
the
Was that
fall.
our total matching skilled nursing facility?
I think so. Well,
9 million.
It was 9. It
Yeah,
was-
they've used just about 9.
It's a
they've
9,
used it.
yeah, it's a $9 million loan that matches. Okay,
Okay, the next provision, starting at the bottom of 9 and going on to 10 and 11 is a provision from a 2019 session law for the University of Wyoming to have 2 different appropriations going into a university student housing account. And the total of those 2 provisions is 49 million. The way the session law is currently, that those funds don't revert until June 30th of 2029. And the funds have not been used, and they're in fact still reside in that UW student housing account. So the bill draft contemplated having those funds revert on June 30th of 2023. You can see they're on page 11, lines 17 through 20 and lines 30 through 35. have that reverting on June 30, 2023. And that was not included in the bill draft.
So you'll recognize this as what we voted on in the CapCon bill. That was struck in Casper, correct?
That was not included in House Bill 64, but the CapCon bill, Senate File 146 does have an amendment to remove this.
Okay. And go ahead.
That 15 million, is that the 15 million that ties into this 131 that we did yesterday or day before?
It's the same number, yeah. This student housing fund was for the defeasance of their bonds, and we rolled that money back in the CapCon bill yesterday, which is what this bill proposed to do, and that was struck out in Casper.
So that we approved the 131, 250, and then somebody said there's 15 million somewhere else, and it's in city cap.
Okay, you lost me there. 131, 250.
This 185 question was, how'd you get to 146? And what?
Oh,
what they
that's the
said
government.
was-
That's the government bill.
Yeah, what they said was there's 15 million somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a whole different deal. That's the government funding bill.
Yeah,
That had done anything to do with this one.
right, but somewhere there's 15 million more that brought that figure up to 146.
Yeah, and when we're done, when we adjourn, we'll have Taylor DuPont come up and walk us through the government bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. Okay, page 11 of the draft, section line 36, Polly.
Yes, so these are the provisions that the select committee discussed in their fall meetings, but these provisions did not end up in House Bill 64. And then the final provision in the working draft, starting at the bottom of 11 and going on to 12, is a provision for the Hathaway scholarship fund or scholarship program to borrow from the LSRA if needed. And that is a provision that has never been used. And that provision did not make it into House Bill 64.
And Polly, let me make sure, this one goes away at the end of the biennium anyway, doesn't it?
Correct. This is currently in the budget bill, chapter 2022 session laws, chapter 51, section 301C. So yes.
So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the working draft. So what did stay is pooled fund investment loans. And this is for YDOT.
Correct.
They clarified that it's LISRA and they lowered it from 200 million to 100 million. That is currently in House Bill 64. The interfund borrowing for group health insurance plan, that was struck as well.
Correct.
And then page 5, the automatic appropriation of LISRA for the school foundation program was cut. That didn't make it into the bill.
Correct.
Page 7, the interfund loan to the unemployment insurance did stay in the bill.
Page 6 is
Page 7. Oh, I see, interfund borrowing.
for the SFP.
Yeah, that was cut out of the bill.
Correct.
And page 7, the interfund loan to the UI stayed.
Yes, that's been that's repealed by House Bill 64, Mr. Chairman.
Page 8, that's moot. That's the veterans home, that's struck.
Correct.
Page 10 and 11 was recouping the 49 million for the the housing project at UW, their bond defeasance. And then page 11 is cash flow for the Hathaway Scholarship,
Correct.
and that was cut out.
Correct.
So there wasn't a whole lot left when we left Casper. So the question is there interest in the committee in restoring some of those reductions in drag on the LISRA that were in there originally in Casper? Or standing with the bill as it is, or do some in part and not in part? Any interest on the committee to do anything different than what we've got in front of us in House Bill 64?
Mr. Chairman, the fiscal note says something about the highway department not having enough money. Could be lead complication paid down there,
That stayed in.
but only 100 million. They had 200 million.
Right,
And it's cut to 100 million.
correct.
Think we should move that back up to 200 million? Or is that 100 million enough?
Well, their note says reported an average of 75 million in contractor expenditures per month during the peak summer months.
So 2 months.
They estimate about
Yeah.
50% would be eligible. So it's less than half of that. It's 30, let me see, 37 million, right? It's the 100 is still well over what, as I read this note, is still well over what they could need, and they've never actually used it.
All right.
This is the one that would take a government shutdown to act of greater than the 30 days to ever actually use it. So there's not a whole lot left in HB 64 from what we looked at in Casper. Is there any interest in restoring any of that from what was cut in Casper on the committee's part?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think you had an amendment prepared, so I'm assuming that's what you'd like to see.
If you don't have the appetite for it, I'm not even going to spend time going over Jim says, no, I'm not going to spend time going over the amendment. If it basically restores working draft 262 is what the amendment does.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we just went through that exercise of highlighting those things. I'm guessing it's a priority for you, Mr. Chairman. Is that true? Would you like us to move it?
Well, it's a priority, yes, to reduce the drag on the LSRA and to restore where it was at 262. That's what I got from leadership, but of course it's the will of the committee.
Well, it's helpful to learn that here now. So I would be happy to
Well,
move that amendment.
that's why we're here. That's
Well,
why.
good to know. That's great to hear today. So I am happy to move that amendment.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. So we have to fill in some blanks with that amendment. And so going back to working draft 262.
Mr. Chairman, if you could just tell us what those numbers are.
Sorry. Well, on page 4 of 262.
It says XX.
That was the group insurance plan coverage, currently a maximum of $60 million. That was cut out. And the group health insurance plan is so healthy. I remember 60 seemed like God's plenty. When they needed a backstop because they were broke the last time, how much was it? Do you remember, Senator Grew? Was it 25 million?
They were negative 40 million, something like that.
40 million. So I mean,
Then they've been touching their statutory maximum in the last year, but then I read a report, I think last night, that said they were headed south.
Mr. Chairman, and
please.
just for the benefit of my own clarification, that provision is really just in the case that a school district is moving on to the state employee group insurance program, that they would provide a loan of up to $60 million for that transition to bring on the additional liabilities for outstanding health claims and things like that. So it's not a broad backstop, but just for
Okay.
that situation. And that provision is in House Bill 64 as repealed. The Department of Administration Information testified that they felt it should be repealed.
All 205 is repealed. I have it as struck out in Casper.
This is, yeah, that's in the House Bill 64. The next one that you go to on page 5 is one that's not.
Okay, so if 205 stayed in, what dollar limit did they use?
They repealed the provision.
Oh, they completely repealed it. All right.
And this amendment doesn't put it back in.
I think we leave it repealed, don't we?
Correct, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right.
Then we don't need a dollar amount.
No, we don't. You're correct. That's my error.
Yeah.
All right. Page 5. This is,
Mr. Chairman, this is the LSRA guarantee to the SFP of the $100 million balance. And that in the amendment 2201 is adds it into House Bill 64 to be repealed. On the amendment, it's line 23. And it amends page 3, line 20 of House Bill 64 and inserts that 94219B is repealed.
let me ask you something, Polly. Could we repeal this if HB 89 is enacted? That's the 5X bill.
H89,
HB 89 is the
Mhm.
5X. It
Correct.
kicks the reserves up to 5 times.
correct. And could you repeat your question, Mr. Chairman?
Could we repeal this automatic appropriation contingent on HB 89 passing?
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 89 would increase the Common School Permanent Land Fund Reserve account by $359 million and, provide basically 5 years of spending insurance, if you will, for the program. I'm not quite sure if I would go so far as to
So if
done.
HB 89 passes and we put that much money into the Common School Public Land Fund Reserve account, it would seem to make the auto appropriation out of the LISRA unnecessary. Can we repeal 94219B contingent on HB 89 passing?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure of all the possible consequences there, but I will say that House Bill 89 does strengthen the spending guarantee for the school.
Okay, yeah.
And the other thing, is that as we know, our revenues are volatile in Wyoming. We all know that. But the long-term profile for the SFP program has for this biennium, $950 million balance, for the 25-26 biennium, a $1.4 billion balance, and for the 27-28 biennium, a $1.8 billion balance.
That's the Common School Public Land Fund Reserve account.
No, that's the school foundation program.
Okay. So has this auto appropriation in 219 ever been used?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I believe it has been used.
And do you know when that was?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to phone a friend on that one.
Okay.
My memory doesn't go back that far.
Do you know how much?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't have that history because I
Okay.
just haven't been here, but it has been used at times.
Well, we either cut out the auto appropriation. So the question that you can't answer is whether we could draft something that makes repeal of 219 effective if HB 89 passes. So I suppose that's a question for the lawyers.
Mr. Chairman, I could certainly have an amendment draft. That could certainly be drafted. Would you like that drafted?
Well, let's just ask the lawyers if that's possible.
Okay, so
And
you
then it's
would,
and then it's kind of hard to put a number. We can either cut out the auto appropriation completely, or we have to put, or it originally called for some cap on the auto appropriation, and I don't know what that cap could be if I don't know what the maximum draw has ever been. But given the health of education, I'm not sure this thing's even needed anymore. But it does certainly create a problem for investment of the LSRA.
Mr. Chairman, I have very good friends and when I phone a friend, they come.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The $500 million backstop to ensure a $100 million balance in the SFP
Pull that
provides,
mic just a little bit closer, Don.
provides support for volatile revenues other than investment income. So property taxes, ad valorem taxes on minerals, federal mineral royalties. It was actually used this year. On June 30th, the school foundation program fell below the $100 million threshold and was required to receive support from the LSRA. It has not happened often. I think it's only once or twice in the history of this provision that it has been exercised, but it was relatively recently.
Do you have any idea on what so the concern that's been conveyed to me is it's an auto appropriation that's virtually unlimited until it hits the $500 million choke chain. Do you know what, if it's been used rarely, do we know what our high water mark is?
Mr. Chairman, I think the worst we have anticipated is just shy of $250 million per year. And we didn't actually hit that, meaning we got some additional revenue in the spring that was unanticipated. I think the actual worst was around 130 or 140, something like that.
So the theoretical worst was $250 million?
Correct.
And that was during the bad times, wasn't it?
Yes.
So then on page 6, line 1, $250 million ought to be plenty of margin, I would think.
Mr. Chairman, that's entirely a policy choice for you. The provision assists in the volatility of revenue, but as expenditures grow in K-12, just like kind of the time value of money, as the obligations of the state towards K-12 grow, that number has the potential to grow along with it.
I see. Well, what I'd propose for now is that we put $250 million in there, and just at least to take a look at an amendment draft. I appreciate knowing that it has been used on. I think it's just the unlimited nature of it that causes the greatest issue. And then Don, on interfund borrowing, you said the high water mark on that was $375 million. That's on page 7 of 262.
Mr. Chairman, yes, in 2017, I believe, is when we hit $375 million loan from the LSRA. That is a different provision. That is merely for cash flow based upon the timing of the receipt of revenue to the state, and we pay the school districts first, meaning we have our outflows early in the year and we get our revenue late in the year.
Yeah, so this one, it's necessary that this stays. This is a necessary cash flow for the school foundation program.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And frankly, the last time I checked this year, as in this calendar year, there was a loan outstanding.
And that's true even with the newly found health of the fund.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So much time on thinking 375.
Yeah, I think 375 million Don indicated during the depths of the dark days was the high. That's above the high water mark, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, that is the high water. We did have a loan out for 375.
Well, maybe we ought to go up above it. You were going to say? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I think this exercise is necessary. But I always go back to why these accounts were created or why these amounts were determined by previous legislators. And assuming that it was done for a good reason, based on the best information at the time. I understand we have opposing views between the House and the Senate, particularly
Can
when
you
it comes
pull
to
the mic a little
education.
bit closer? I'm sorry.
It does, it's okay. I think we're on the right track here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, so the problem is that it's unlimited, Senator Guru.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to sum up so far where we are to make sure
Okay.
we're tracking this all right. This bill was brought this summer in Casper and we worked it. And as I recall, the genesis of this whole deal was the fact that, yes, as the good senator just said, we have these backstops for different monies that are needed at different times. It's more cash flow, cash management, behind the scenes book stuff. And the problem was that we were leaving way too much money sitting on the table in those accounts, waiting for something to theoretically happen that may or may not happen. In some cases with Department of Transportation's never happened. It's
You're
only
really good.
What's that?
You're really good.
Only happened to the tune of $130 million in this one fund, but we've got it to 275. So the idea is to sweep the money into accounts that bear interest. Now, the House, for some reason, unbeknown to us, has cut most of that out. You and the leadership have come up with a plan to put it back in. That's where we're at and we're filling in the numbers. Do I have that right so far?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was in tune. Thanks.
So we're just looking for a number.
Yep.
The concern is with the auto appropriation. I don't know that we're going to get it may be prudent to keep the auto appropriation, perhaps not. We're just looking for a plug to go in there. Based on what I heard from Don, we should go over the 375 high water mark. 450. Okay. Oh,
400.
okay. 400. Gotcha. Okay. And so you're going to have to revise this amendment to put those numbers in.
Mr. Chairman, yes, and I just wanted to make one comment that House Bill 64 passed the House unamended from how the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments
Right.
sponsored it. Just if I had misspoken on that, I wanted to clarify that. And I want to, if these are the changes you want to make to the bill, I just want to walk through and confirm them.
Okay.
Okay. You would like language added into the bill stating that a repeal of the SFP guarantee from LISRA would be contingent on the passing of House Bill 89. I'm not sure if you still wanted that in there. And then because then we moved on to talking about putting in a limit on the
Yeah, if you come back and say the lawyers say it's not prudent to draft repeal contingent on HB 89, then we just put a number in there.
okay. And so the alternative there would be to add in the piece of the working draft that's on page 5, starting on line 28, no transfer made from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account under this subsection shall exceed $250 million.
Correct.
Okay, and then you'd like the amendment S-2201 to be incorporated or to be revised to have that cap on the interfund borrowing for the SFP to be changed to 400 million.
Correct.
And then there's one other thing that this amendment 2201 currently does that we haven't talked about, which is it repeals that Hathaway borrowing authority on the LISRA. That's the final thing that it does on page 4.
Has that been utilized?
Pardon me?
Has that been utilized?
No, Mr. Chairman, it has not been utilized.
And then I think we've got a bill that is going to fill the Hathaway. Right.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 89 puts 4.6 million into the Hathaway Scholarship Endowment Reserve Account.
And then it does something else. It jiggers something around for the cash flow to make the cash flow work. Maybe it's just putting more money in there.
It also suspends the tip to the corpus for the period of the budget.
Okay.
Or no, actually, I'm sorry. That's the budget provision. The House Bill 89 provision is that it raises the cap to 47 million or 8% of the moving average, 5-year moving average of the corpus. So it raises that balance.
So repealing the Hathaway, which is going to expire anyways on page 12 of the draft.
the working draft.
262. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. If you can,
Do you want that in the amendment to remain?
well,
in
we
the
want to
amendment?
take a look at it.
Keep it in.
Yeah, we want to take a look at it.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, going to add in that provision to your amendment, going to add in that provision for the SFP borrowing to be capped at 250 million. That would be per year, and change the interfund borrowing for the SFP limit to 400 million. And we're gonna keep the Hathaway provision in here repealed. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
okay.
And I apologize, but what's so awkward about it is in 262, and as I recall in Casper, it was a divided vote on removing all those things. Once you, and I'm talking to the committee now, once you strip all those things out, there's really not much of a bill left. So it's certainly a point that's worth the discussion, I think, but we'll just lay this back until we get that amendment back.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
So
Polly.
just modifying your amendment.
Yeah. And then if we proceed with it, we got to figure out how the heck to present it to the floor in a way that makes any sense. That's why I had to bring 262 in so we could see what was actually struck out. Because there's not much of a bill left after 262, after Casper. And the real uncertainty is, you know, the unlimited auto appropriation out of the LISRA down to $500 million. Okay, thanks, Polly. Who's going to walk us through the reviser's bill? Is that David?
So what are we doing?
Mr.
We're laying it back till we get the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Please.
may, I think there's a number of people in the room to do House Bill 14, which is their first item on our agenda for the day,
Okay,
who go back to do the people's work in the agencies.
okay.
Sorry,
And
David.
This is just a re-referral. Is that correct, Senator Nethercott?
Yes.
Okay, we'll take up 14. Thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Elisa Butler. I am the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. So this bill does come to you as a re-referral. What this bill does is currently there are two different filing fees in the district courts. One is a probate filing fee, one is a just general civil filing fee. They are different right now. This bill brings them together so that they are now the same. What we have found is there's a lot of confusion about which fee applies to which kinds of cases. And so this bill just really intends to make everything the same on an even playing field and will also assist as we move toward e-filing. I believe this is a re-referral, Mr. Chair, to your committee based on the amendment that was made in the Senate Judiciary Committee. So what that amendment does is it delays implementation of that filing fee, the change in the filing fee for state agencies. And so I believe and I know Ms. Gordy is here from the Department of Family Services, Child Support Enforcement, and so she can speak to this more intelligently than I. But I believe there is a fiscal impact to DFS with this bill.
Okay, so which are the two you're evening up, district and circuit court?
Mr. Chair, they are both in district court. One applies to probate cases and one applies to just general
Oh,
civil
I see.
cases.
Okay, gotcha. Questions for Ms. Butler? No? All right.
Thank you.
Don't go far.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Christy Gordy, Senior Administrator, Department of Family Services, the Economic Security Division. Ms. Butler's correct. There is a fiscal impact to the department with regards to this bill. There are no concerns from the department with this bill. We've actually dealt with this a couple times in the past, I believe 2017 and 2019. But
I'm
child,
sorry, you gotta speak
I'm
slower.
fast, I'm
It's-
sorry.
Really having a
Um,
hard time following you.
Sure. So this has come up
Don't
in
be
the
nervous.
past.
We're not scary.
Oh, no,
We look
I
that
just
way.
talk fast, Mr. Chairman. So this has come up in the past, 2017 and 2019, when filing fees were raised. A similar amendment was put into the bill at that time. What it does is allow the agency to go and ask for this money in our budget moving forward. So again, we have no issues with the bill, but the child support program as well as our child welfare, but mainly the child support program files approximately 3,000 filings a year that require us to pay the filing fee. As such, our current budget is not built right now to handle this increase in filing fees. So what the amendment did and what we asked was just for a delayed start date essentially for us so that we could get the money in our budget and then be prepared to pay the increased filing fee. And that was the amendment that was put into this bill. The fiscal impact, which I'm not sure that you will have, is approximately $127,000 in state general fund each year. A good portion of that will be matched by the child support feds at 66%. And if you have any questions.
So we won't have uniformity when we're done. Some cases will have a different filing fee. The increase in civil case filing fees, this is the amendment, shall not apply to any state agency required to pay the fee as amended by Section 1 of this Act. What actions would that be? Just child support actions?
Mr. Chair, primarily it would be child support actions. There may be other state, in fact, I believe there are other state agencies that this may apply to, but it would be for a short period of time. And so would within the next 18 months-ish, bring everybody under the same filing fee for all cases that are filed in the district courts. So with that short period, we could adjust.
So you'd make up the loss in your next biennial budget request then? Is that the idea?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. And that is what we have done in the past.
Okay, I do recall that. So with that, I see the fiscal app. Let me ask this. The agency estimate of administrative impact, do you have that in front of you?
Mr. Chairman, I do. I also have copies if you would like it.
Under fiscal year 2023, it says NA. Does that reflect the amendment?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Committee? Nothing? All right, well, thank you. It's agency comment. Any public comment? Anybody on the,
No, Mr. Chairman.
okay, Jeremiah, did you have comment on this? Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We are standing in support of this bill to support the clerks of district court to alleviate some administrative frustrations that they experience on a regular basis. In the Senate committee, they did indicate that they were perfectly fine with this amendment and could administer it during this period where there will be a difference for these state agencies.
Anything from Mr. Ryman? All right, thank you. Anybody on Zoom? Any further public comment? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, close public comment. It's to the committee. Move second discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salzar has submitted his vote as an aye. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye.
I
Thank you all.
advised you, Pat.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. All right, David, revisers bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Hopkinson with the Legislative Service Office to walk through House Bill 52, the revisers bill. I'll just kind of quickly go through it, and then if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay. So tell me, first of all, what is a revisers bill?
Mr. Chairman, the revisers bill is actually one of two bills that is allowed to have more than a single subject pursuant to our Wyoming Constitution, the other being the budget bill. And the purpose of this bill is primarily, or really kind of exclusively, to go through the statutes and to make corrections. It's not the intent of the bill to make substantive changes per se, but rather to simply provide grammatical clarification, grammatical corrections, correct errors and citations, those sorts of things, just to clean up the entirety of the statutes every year as we see these come
Okay.
through and provide this bill. So the first change that this bill makes on page 2, line 14, is to correct a reference to the legislative stabilization reserve account by inserting the word reserve to make that the correct account name. On page 3, line 3, we say grammatical correction, changing the apostrophe in years. On page 3, line 13, we make a correction to Article 3 of this chapter. It should, from Chapter 3 of this article, the articles.
Hold on just a second, David.
Sure.
Do we want to start a pool as to how far you get in presenting this bill before people start yelling for the question?
Mr. Chairman, I think many of this is pretty explanatory when looking through it.
Yeah,
I know LSO staff time is precious, so. I think if maybe we have specific questions, maybe we can ask him of it. Otherwise, I can see the difference in where the apostrophe is located and make my own deductions, but. So, Mr. Chairman, question?
question, yeah. Public comment, agency comment, closed to the committee.
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson. Senator Carew.
Aye.
Senator Nethercott. Senator Salazar's voted aye, absentee. And Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Thank you, David. That concludes our business. I will adjourn the meeting. Let me know when we're